passive income, I think some people think it's this get rich quick scheme, and it's absolutely not, right? It does take time or money to create. So the first step is asking yourself, which do you have more of? Do you have more time or do you have more money? Because you're going to need one or the other to invest into creating this passive income stream.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else with your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grinzik. With me, as always, is John Cohen. How are we doing today?
We're good. No complaints.
Short and sweet. Love
Short
it.
and sweet.
Second episode of the day. We're a little bit behind, so this is going to come out very quick. But very excited to have our guest on today. Really interested to hear her story and her experiences because it's a little bit different than a lot of other people. I'm actually just not going to say any more. I'm going to let her tell her story and bring her on. But Rachel, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Chris and John, thanks for having me on. I'm a lot of things. I'm a former financial advisor. I'm a best-selling author of 2 books on financial literacy. My husband and I own 6 properties. It's almost 40 units or 40 doors total. And what people find most interesting about me is that last year at the age of 27, I quit my job and retired, and I'm now living off over $15,000 per month in passive income.
Awesome. Short and sweet. I love it. I think it's going to hook a ton of people in, and I'm super interested to dive in more. So can you walk us through a little bit when you first started learning about real estate and how you got involved in it?
Yeah, I had always been an avid reader. Like, I've been a finance nerd my whole life. So I was reading books all through literally middle school, high school, college. And I think I first picked up Rich Dad, Poor Dad in high school, which was the first book that talked about real estate investing. So that's what got me turned on to it. And I'd always wanted to invest in real estate. To me, it's one of those tools. It's just one of the best tools for building long-term wealth. And I think every young person should absolutely own rental property. I held myself back a little bit because I thought I needed to have a ton of money to do it, which now that I know the things I know, that's not necessarily true. But in 2017, I didn't own any rental property. That year, my husband and I bought our first duplex, and that was our first rental. It did really, really well, and we were able to scale pretty quickly. And through 2017 and 2018, we acquired all of our properties, all 38 units.
Awesome. So what was it that changed from that first property to the second property? Like, what was it about it that you said, hey, this isn't as bad, or we can do it with less money, or we can scale quicker? Like, what was that mindset shift for you?
Yeah, I just think that until you buy your first property, it just still feels like this scary, abstract thing. And it's still, is this really going to work? What am I doing? And once we bought it and the money started coming in, that's when we sort of had the light bulb moment of, wow, this really works. And we can actually achieve financial independence just through real estate. So I think it made us even more motivated. And then we were able to scale a lot more quickly than we thought possible. A lot of people ask, where'd you come up with the down payment for your first property? We were lucky for a few reasons. First, neither of us had any college debt. Have you guys heard of Cutco knives by any chance?
Former salesman.
John, I didn't know that about you. I am too. So I paid my way through school selling Cutco, and I graduated debt-free. And then my husband is a military veteran, so he used his military benefits to pay for his college. So we both graduated debt-free, which just really enabled us to save money more quickly than other people our age. I've never made 6 figures in my life. I didn't receive an inheritance. I just have always been able to live frugally. Even when I was making 30-something thousand in my first job out of school, I found a way to save 50% of my income. So it only took a few years for us to save enough money to buy a property. And the second great thing we had going for us is we are investing in Louisville, Kentucky. And I think anywhere in the Midwest where you invest, it's a great place to own rentals. So Louisville, Kentucky, it's pretty cheap. Housing prices aren't crazy. Our first duplex was $100,000, which even for the area we were in, that was a great price. So we both put $10,000 in to get to our down payment. And then the third thing that I had going for us, which helped us scale a lot faster than we thought, is that I had my real estate license, and I still do to this day. I never had it for the purposes of having clients. I only had it for myself to invest in properties. So the thing is, we would totally deplete our savings with every purchase we'd buy, but then I would immediately get a commission check for thousands of dollars, and that would kickstart our savings for the next property. And that's how we were able to scale so quickly.
So how did you, because I'm not sure I understood, when you said you had your license just for you, how are you then getting commissions? Was it on the properties you bought, you were charging yourself a commission, or I just didn't follow
Yeah,
that?
so I was representing myself as the buyer's agent.
Gotcha.
And so I would get part of that commission back from the seller, because the seller is the one who pays the commission. So for me, I was like, well, this is free money. And that was a great way for me to make a ton of extra money while investing.
So that's something that I don't think people realize. So like there's two schools of thought on having your license or not. When the seller pays, you could either lower the purchase price and or use it for your standpoint of putting it in a savings account for your next purchase. So I think that's a really intriguing thing. I've never heard anyone talk about that component of having a license. And like you said, the seller pays for it. So whether you get a credit on the purchase price and or a commission, getting a commission actually helps you, fuel your next purchase as opposed to just lowering your price, because the lower price is not going to change your equity requirements by much. So you're better off putting that thousands bucks, whatever it may be, into the bank as opposed to, reducing the price.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the way I was looking at it. Cash is king. So I wanted that commission check.
Yeah. I mean, just from a number standpoint, if you, lower the purchase price, you're only going to get you're only going to save 20% of the purchase price. If you get the check back, you're getting 100%. So you're talking about on $100,000, you probably got $3,000, give or take. You're talking about the difference between, $60 or 3,000 or something like that, or
Yeah,
maybe
something like that.
600 or 3,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty big difference. So that makes a ton of sense. Let me ask a question. When you were working finance, how did you then go into these different things? Did you feel like, were you spending a ton of time, or was it something like, hey, we got our first one and sat on it for a little bit, and then we just continued to save money plus the cash flow, plus the commission checks to get the second one? Like, what was your process like while you were still working before you were able to get to a place where you could retire?
Yeah, we were hustling. I mean, I've never worked harder in my life for literally 2 straight years. My husband and I were both putting in 80-hour weeks. I mean, our weekends were non-existent because basically we were both working full-time. We had our full-time jobs. Then we were using our weekends to look for rental properties, acquire rental properties, manage our existing tenants. So we were at our rentals every single weekend. And then I was writing my books in the evenings. So I didn't have any free time. I mean, I just didn't do anything for 2 years.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting to me. When you were working on this stuff, how were you looking at the books? Because a lot of people have talked about writing books or done books. And to me, at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to assume anything, it feels like it was fairly early on in the process from when you were doing this stuff, unless it's about something else. You'll have to tell me what the titles of the books are also. But how were you approaching those?
Yeah, so my first book is Money Honey, and I was never approaching the whole book writing thing as a monetization. I wasn't coming from I want more money and I want to create this income stream. It truly for me was a passion project and something I just felt compelled to do, because all throughout high school and college, my family and friends would come to me for financial advice. And that was great because that's what I love to help people with.
Mm-hmm.
I also began to wonder, well, why aren't they learning on their own or, reading books about this stuff? And then I realized, oh yeah, personal finance is boring, right? It's complicated and overwhelming and complex. So no wonder no one likes to read books about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought to myself, well, how can I make this topic sassy and fun and simple? And that's where the idea for Money Honey came from. So I began writing it, again, just a passion project. I didn't think I was going to make money from it. I think the average author sells 250 to 300 copies. So it's a really tough thing to break into.
Mm-hmm.
And I even quit writing at one point because I was convinced that my writing was crap. And I was like, who am I to write this book?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think you're doing, Rachel? So I quit writing it. It wasn't until a friend encouraged me to pick it back up that I got back to it. But in the end, I told myself, if I can just help one person, that's all I want to do. And that's the only reason I went through with publishing it. And I think that's a good thing, because if I had been motivated by money or just out to make a quick money grab, I really think people would have seen right through that and it wouldn't have done as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Money Honey has been more successful than I would have thought possible. It's sold over 15,000 copies and it has over 600 reviews on Amazon now.
Wow, congrats.
Thank you.
What about the second book? Was there anything different for that? How did you approach that one?
So after I launched Money Honey and I saw that it actually was making a lot of money, I realized I do have this passion for writing and I can help people with my books. So in 2019, which is the year that I quit my job, I began to write Passive Income, Aggressive Retirement. And at that point, I'd already told people, here's what I'm doing. I'm creating passive income. I'm investing in rental properties. I'm going to quit my job before I'm 30.
Mm-hmm.
And so people were excited. They wanted to learn how I did this. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I started writing the second book. So it's not like it's all about me. The book outlines 28 different passive income models. So trust me when I say there is something out there for everyone.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah. I think one thing that's super important, and I also want to ask you about this as well, is as we started getting into a similar space of trying to give back, John and I took a look at ourselves and said, like, hey, how can we best do that? How can we best, educate people and spread a message and help people learn? And fortunately or unfortunately, neither of us are very good writers. John is worse than I am, and he's fair to say pretty damn atrocious. I have to spell check stuff, and that's not saying much at all. And we fight back and forth on who's going to write our monthly newsletter, and it's the bane of our existence. But I think we gravitated more towards the audio and video side because it's just more natural. And I think it sounds like you found that passion in doing written stuff, which a lot of people like. And I actually think there's been, the age of the blog was, 10 to 20 years ago. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of gone away. And now it's the age of audio and video. And I think it's important for people to understand, like, hey, if I do want to do some sort of marketing, branding, education, outreach, understanding what medium is best for you and what you enjoy is more important than doing it the best way for today, because it's going to change and come in waves and do different things. And you are obviously, I don't want to say go against the norm, because books are always popular and always have been, but you were able to find something that worked really well for you.
Yeah, it was definitely a long shot with the book, because when you think about, there's thousands of personal finance books out there. So why would mine be any different? And I think when you are thinking about writing a book, that's the question you have to ask yourself, is why would somebody buy my book over the thousands that are already out there? And whether that's a podcast or a blog or a YouTube or whatever you're doing, you have to be able to articulate that. And if you can't, you're not going to be able to sell your product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's the same thing for us. John, how long did we talk about starting a podcast? It had to have been 2 years before we launched, and we were like, why are we going to do this? Like, who's going to listen to us, and why, how are we going to be any different? And I think our ultimate goal was just to try to create something that was just authentic and honest and raw. And I think we do a pretty good job, considering I just ripped John for being a terrible writer and myself. But I think that's hugely important whenever you go into anything, regardless if it's, a book, content creation, a business, or whatever. It's understanding what your niche is and what you're doing. One thing that I think that is interesting as we're talking, as I think about it, with the rise of social media continuing to become more popular, there's been this rise of like mini like influencers or stars or celebrities. And I think what people like about that is that they get insight into the people themselves. So it's not just, Rachel Richards, Money Honey, financial freedom. I'm sure there's a lot of other aspects of your life that you talk about and let people see that people like. Maybe it's you like cooking, or you like wine, or stuff with your husband, or you go hiking, or you have a dog, or, little things that people associate. And it's not just one thing. Yourself is also that kind of unique aspect too, of like, hey, maybe there's somebody that wants to learn about finance, but they also, like skiing, and you're the person that does both. They're probably going to follow you over somebody like Dave Ramsey, who's hugely popular, talks about personal finance, but doesn't do skiing. And they may like that about you too. So I think when people think about it, you also have to remember that there's things about you not directly related to what you do that are unique that people will like as well.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think a mistake that a lot of new entrepreneurs or business owners make on social media is that they use it as a promotional platform.
Hmm.
But to me, building that personal relationship with somebody and building that trust, that's more important than promoting your stuff. And people get sick of all the promotional stuff anyway.
Hmm.
So, I think using social media to be real about yourself, be authentic, show your audience who you really are behind the cover of my book.
Hmm.
And or just share funny stuff that people like. That's really how I use social media.
Awesome. I love that. I want to come back to a little bit what we were talking about, went a little off track, but I liked it. So first rental, you got it, and then started thinking about the second and third. At what stage did you start to take a long, hard look in and be like, that mindset of I'm going to retire before 30 and like, this is what I'm going to do? How did you go about figuring that out? Did you work backwards? Did you just do real estate? Are there other income streams that get to that 15,000 a month? Like, how did you put that picture together and then ultimately execute on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I worked backwards. So my husband and I sat down. We looked at our average expenses over the last 6 months, and I think at the time it was like 6,000 a month. Okay, so I'm not trying to retire and be super super frugal. Like I want to be able to do whatever I want. So it's called fat fire, I guess, in the fire community.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I wanted to have such a big income stream. So the initial goal was to have $10,000 a month in passive income. That way we'd cover our living style and we'd be able to still save money or have a buffer. And my initial plan actually was to buy 15 single family homes, buying one a year, all on 15-year mortgages, and then retiring after 15 years. That was my initial plan. And then once we started investing, everything just took off and it happened a lot faster than that. So that was great. But in terms of my income streams now, rental properties and my royalty income from my books are my two biggest ones. So in a normal month, we're making anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 a month in profit from just our rentals.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of book income, in February, I just had my first $7,000 month in book profits.
Wow, congrats.
So between those two, that kind of gets us to the 15. We have a few other things. I don't have a ton of portfolio income, but I invest in Fundrise and REITs, and I'm making some dividends from that. We also just did our first 2 real estate syndication deals where we invested. Haven't gotten our first payments yet, but that should be another good source of income.
Mm-hmm. I think it's awesome. So when you were in that process of figuring it out, were you allocating, like, were you saying like, we're going to take this amount of money every month? Like, how did you guys go through the process of, because it's not easy, but it's somewhat easier to say, hey, look at what I need to accomplish it. But then how did you guys actually look at what you were doing to get to that end goal? Like, you worked backwards, but can you take me a little bit more like granular? Because I think people will get a ton of value because working backwards, yep, I want to make 10,000 a month. It's very easy. I can look at rentals. How do I do it? Then how did you actually execute on that plan?
Yeah, for sure. So again, at the time, our living expenses were $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now we could have probably cut back more than that. But again, I didn't want to have to reduce my quality of life to get to where I was going. So we wanted to focus more on the increasing your income side rather than decreasing your expenses. Now, that said, we've always been frugal people. So even when we were spending that amount of money each month, we were still able to save thousands of dollars each month. So before the first property, we didn't have any other income. It was just our full-time jobs.
Mm-hmm.
We were saving a lot of money. Then we basically, with the cash flow of every new property, we would reinvest that. So that increased our savings each month exponentially. I think the first duplex we bought, it was immediately cash flowing $500 per month in profit. So that was $500 extra we were saving and adding it to all the other savings that we already had. Mm-hmm. And then I think the second property, it was a big one. It was like a building. We were making like $2,500 a month in profit. Mm-hmm. So that was another huge jump for us, and it let us save money a lot faster for the next property. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, we've always been frugal. We still went on trips and we did all the things that we love to do. But overall, for our income levels then and now, we live pretty modestly.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important. It's something I've talked about before of just to get to that, passive income stage or offset your income or retirement. There's a balance for like the life you want to live versus how quickly you want to retire. It sounds like you were somewhat able to do both, which is tremendous. But, I've talked to a bunch of people and they're like, why do you rent where you rent? Why do you have, before COVID, like, why do you live in a more expensive place? Why do you drive, a slightly nicer car? And it's just because those are things that I enjoy. And I would rather, I don't necessarily plan on retiring, and you guys obviously aren't retired either, quote unquote, but I'm going to be doing something for decades. So if it takes me an extra 5 years or 10 years, I'm personally okay with that because it's the lifestyle that I want and enjoy. But if my goal was to say, hey, I want to be fully retired and never work a day in my life again by 30, 35, I would have to change what I was doing substantially. So I think it's credit to you guys for understanding and working backwards of, hey, here's what we wanted, right, wrong, or indifferent. There is no right or wrong, but it is what it is. And working backwards and, not having to justify it to anybody but yourselves, I think is super important, because too many people get caught up of, I have to cut to retire early. And there's an awesome book that I love. It's called Quitting Like a Millionaire, which is probably very similar to a lot of your stuff. And their mindset is slightly different, where they said, hey, we're just going to drop it so low where they live off of like $40,000 combined a year, but they live tax-free and they're able to travel on that. But again, there's nothing wrong with that. Just because it's different than what you and your husband were looking to do, it's just a totally different model, but they understood what they were looking for. And they, again, same thing, very similarly worked out how to go about accomplishing it.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, there's so many ways to achieve early retirement if you want. And I think the way I look at it from my own personal journey, you have to sacrifice something as you're getting there. You either have to sacrifice money, which normally means sacrificing your quality of life, or you have to sacrifice time. And I think what my husband and I did is we focused on the latter. We sacrificed our time for 2 years by working our butts off so that we could then retire and have a ton of money and have the freedom that we want for the rest of our lives.
So I think it's easier. I think the norm, the herd mentality, I'll just stop spending. People look at it that way, as it's easier to, okay, I won't go out to dinner 3 times a week. I'll go out once. Whereas the other way is there's probably more obstacles and mountains to climb. We say, okay, I'm not changing that. I need an extra $4,000 in income. And people look at that and say, well, how am I, they automatically equate a 9-to-5 job with, I make 50 grand a year. Well, if I need to make another 50 grand, I can't work another 9-to-5. So I think it's easier for the most part to look at it from, I'll just eliminate expenses. But I agree with both of you, because from my standpoint, when I was younger, I said, I don't really want to work when I'm 50 or 40. I'll go the other way. I'll just work, 100 hours a week when I'm young. So then when I'm 50, I don't have to do it anymore. I think most people, it's hard for them to part with quality of life, even though it may only be 2 years in your case, or 5 years or 10 years. Most people look at it like, no, I want to go out drinking with my friends. I want to go out partying. I want to go to the club. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can do that, but you have to scale something back. So if you want to get there, you're either going to, like you said, you're going to have to sacrifice your time, or you're going to have to find more money somewhere. Or the other way to do it, like you said, is just, how do I earn more or make more so I can still maintain my lifestyle? And that's going to be the time sacrifice. But I don't think most people look at it that way, because it's easier to just look at your credit card bill and say, okay, well, I won't go to the restaurant 4 times a week or whatever it is. It's an easier way to achieve the goal from a standpoint of conceptually. I think as far as level of effort or ease, I think either way works. It's just a matter of what type of person someone is. And I would have to put myself in I'll sacrifice my young age time for a better life in the future than, what the future looks like without having that, extra income.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it really just depends on your priorities. The thing about decreasing expenses is that it's limited, right? There's only so much you can do to decrease it. You can't just stop buying food or stop paying your rent or mortgage. But you're right, John, it's a lot easier. That's the go-to for everyone. It's easy to just cut your expenses. It really doesn't take any extra effort. And then on the other hand, you have increasing your income, which does take effort, and it can feel very intimidating to people. But the good thing is that there's no cap on how much money you can make in a year. There's nothing stopping you from making more money.
100%.
I have a question, and I think it's going to be really important due to what's happened with COVID and everything. Is we've seen a ton of large, medium, small businesses that have failed because their revenue got cut overnight and not a lot of cash reserves. Not saying anybody should have been prepared for that or not, but what I want to know from you is, as you were going through this journey, how did you look at the money you were making, saving, and putting towards getting to retirement, of cash, cash reserves, being safe, having, an emergency fund versus putting all that money to work as quickly as possible so we could get to that passive income and retire? Were you guys a little bit more risky and just trying to get there quicker, or like, how did you guys balance that and look at it?
Yeah, we're both pretty good with risk. So we were risky, especially in the beginning, because we would buy a property and literally deplete our entire savings. So we were very risky from that perspective. But then again, I knew I had that commission check coming back, so it wasn't going to be at zero forever. But we were willing to take more risk in the beginning. But now I would say, because income loss could be detrimental to you. And we are seeing that this year now more than ever. There are two ways you can safeguard yourself or your business against income loss. Number one is to have a huge cash reserve. Okay, so based on our savings right now, we could live for 2 or 3 years probably just on our savings and not have to do anything. And so we have a huge cash reserve. But then there's another way to safeguard against income loss. So a lot of people think that having a full-time salary job equates to job stability and income security. And I don't agree with that, because there's nothing secure about being 100% dependent on a single source of income, right? Because what happens when you lose your job, when your hours get cut? Then you lose that income stream. So if you really want to protect yourself, you should be thinking about, how do I have income coming in from multiple different sources? Mm-hmm. And that's why I love passive income so much. So here's a perfect example. Coronavirus hits earlier this year. Okay, landlords are in trouble immediately. I went from making $8,000 to $12,000 a month in rental income to, in April, we made $1,000. Okay, now if that was my only income stream, I would have been in serious trouble. But the only reason I wasn't operating out of a place of panic or desperation that month is because I had all these other income streams keeping me afloat. So I think that's the best thing people can do right now. Either have a huge cash reserve or figure out how to have multiple streams of income.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we've seen, the businesses that were in multiple places or were just able to pivot very quickly have had a tremendous amount of success during this time period. I mean, you hear about the companies that have had crazy growth, like the free conference calling, Slack, other things that were in multiple places. They were just had some different things that were readily available and or pivoted or doubled down when things kind of changed. I think it's hugely important. So because I'm curious for myself as well, because it's something I'm starting to look at as well. What are some of the, I don't want to say easier ways, but what are some of the more maybe lower barriers to entry, more common ways, or, ways that you would suggest people start examining to get other streams of passive income?
Yeah, so passive income, I think some people think it's this get rich quick scheme, and it's absolutely not, right? It does take time or money to create. So the first step is asking yourself, which do you have more of? Do you have more time or do you have more money? Because you're going to need one or the other to invest into creating this passive income stream. Now, if you're anything like I was a few years ago, I would have said, oh, I have neither. I don't have time or money. So the next question to ask yourself is, what's going to be easier for you to free up? Will it be easier for you to free up more time or to create more money? So that's the first step. And then I think you can really narrow down the passive income streams from there. We've talked a lot about the ones that require more money up front. Real estate investing, it can require more money, but there are ways around that. And then portfolio income is also really commonly known. But the ones that require more time instead of money tend to be more accessible for most people. And generally, that would be the royalty income category. So writing a book, creating an online course. One of the most attainable ones that I like to talk about is called print on demand. And my husband and I actually have this one too. I just don't talk about it because it's only making like $200 a month at the moment. But the way this works is there's platforms out there like Merch and Teespring and Redbubble, and they have all of these products. They have t-shirts, tote bags, phone cases. You create designs to go on the products, and then you get paid a royalty when they are sold. And the brilliant thing about this is most people that are trying to sell a product have to have a physical storefront or an online store, and they're carrying inventory in the hopes that they're going to sell that. That means you're taking on a huge financial risk. But the great thing about print on demand is everything is made to order. So you only get paid if the product sells, and you never even touch the product. So it completely eliminates the financial risk. And I think it's something that anybody can get started doing today.
So someone that was looking to explore that, how is that feasible? Is it something that is built off of a brand and people just want to support it? Is it something that, is it kind of like a drop shipping type model where you're going to do marketing and advertising and try to get people to pay for it? Like, how do you see that as a viable solution or other income stream for somebody? Like, how is that built up by somebody?
Yeah, it's a little bit like drop shipping. You will have to do marketing and promotional stuff, but you just pick whichever platform. There's tons of platforms. I'm on Redbubble and Merch, and it's Amazon Merch, so it's on Amazon's platform. Now, the great thing about being on Amazon's platform is that you're getting in front of millions and millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes if you have good designs, if you have good keywords, and you're doing things well, you can get a lot of just organic traffic, and you won't have to do as much marketing and advertising. So
Mm-hmm.
right now, I mean, in our biggest month, my husband and I made $1,700 from our print on demand.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, again, we're making about $200 a month, but we're doing zero advertising and we're doing zero work because we just haven't paid any attention to it. So it's just all organic sales from the platform itself.
Interesting. So it's what you're saying. You've literally just set it up, kind of, you just monitor it and see what happens. You guys really haven't spent a whole lot of time on it.
No, I mean, we did at first when we were, getting all the designs uploaded and getting it going, and now it's become very, very hands-off. And you don't have to have graphic design skills to do this. You don't have to have Photoshop skills. My husband and I don't know how to do that. So we've used Upwork and Fiverr to find freelance designers to make designs to go on our products. And then for text-based designs, those are easy enough that we figure out how to make those on our own. But yeah, now it's very hands-off and we're not doing anything.
Gotcha. I think that's interesting for going forward, because I think this is always curious when someone does have that, early retirement, that fire type thing. I know you guys you built in additional income, so it's not just you're living on what you make. How are you guys viewing the future? Like, what are you guys looking to do? Where are you guys going from here?
I think one thing we're looking to do is to transition into something even more passive. We're still self-managing our rental properties. We did have a property manager, which went to complete shit. I can tell you guys that story. That was really fun.
Yeah.
You want to hear it?
Yeah, go for it. We love war stories.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many mistakes made, learning how to invest in rental properties. But the biggest and most costly one was the way we hired our property manager, because we wanted to hire an individual where we could pay them less, A, and B, be more hands-on with how they were managing our properties. That was the mistake we made. So there was a couple that had already been working for us, and they were doing things like cleaning the common areas, lawn care, maintenance. They were the hardest working people I've ever known, always went above and beyond. So when it came time to hire a property manager, we were like, well, what if we give these guys a chance and just see how they do? So that's what we did. Rookie mistake. So they started out really strong. And then about 6 months in, my husband went to the lock boxes on site to pick up rent one weekend. Noticed there was a lot missing, more than just a tenant paying late here and there. So of course we're trying to call our property managers and they're just totally MIA. It turns out they stole $6,000 in rent just that weekend, and they had been squatting in vacant units and rooms in our properties for almost a year. So that's awesome. Super embarrassing, but I like to share it because hopefully somebody else can learn from my mistake. The moral of the story is property management is not the place to be cheap, right? You want to go with the qualified, licensed, bonded, insured property management company. Because the thing is, if one of their employees had done that to us, they would have been liable for the damages, not us. But now here we are. There's a warrant out for their arrest. We're still looking for them, and it was like $20,000 in damages total. So please learn from my mistakes, guys.
Yeah. So I think what would be interesting is like, okay, what did you guys do after that? Because I don't want somebody to hear that and be like, oh no, like can't do it out of state. Like, how did you guys solve that problem? Because clearly you did, and it's doing better. Maybe it's not ideal, but
yeah,
you got over it. So how was that process like?
So first of all, that happened when we were in state. So
Okay.
I want to clarify that can happen to anybody. So don't be afraid to pursue long distance landlording. What we did after that, just because, well, now we have trust issues, obviously, when it comes to property managers, we kind of took everything back under our control because I had to fix the books. I had to go back and talk to all the tenants and just get everything back to how it was operating before. So we had months, a couple months of work to do to just get it back to normal. And then once we decided to long distance landlord, we decided, okay, we're going to one of the mistakes we made is that we were reliant on these people for everything. They did our cleaning, they did our lawn care, our maintenance. And once we lost them, we had no team in place. That was a huge mistake. So when we decided to move to Colorado, we were like, okay, we're going to have a team in place. That way, if someone messes up, it's not as detrimental to us. So now we have pest control people. We have different cleaning people, different maintenance people. And for the property management, we're still self-managing all of it on our own. The good thing about moving away, though, is it's forced us to become more efficient. Because before, if something happened, we'd be like, oh, okay, we're going to run down to the property. We'd go down once or twice a week. Now we don't have that option. So we have to outsource things. And it's actually become a lot easier to manage long distance. And for anything that I need somebody I trust on hand, like showing a unit or signing a lease, we're having my dad help us with that. But if we didn't have him, we would just hire a property management company at this point.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, because I think some people might be in a, I don't want to say similar situation, but trying to do things similar to you, run it, but be out of state. How are you able to find some of these people that were able to do things? And how were you able to structure it where, with 40 something units probably doesn't support a full-time maintenance guy, I would assume, or maybe it does, I don't know. But how are you able to structure it that it was able to make sense for both of you and for them financially?
Yeah, we don't have anyone that's like on full-time or that we're contracting full-time or anything. One of the big resources that we've always leaned on is the Real Estate Investors Association. There's normally one of those in like every big city. So I've always been a member of the Kentucky Real Estate Investors Association. Whenever I need somebody to do any type of work, I go there first to ask for recommendations, because these are other investors. They know who not to work with, and they'll tell you that. And they know who are the good, trustworthy guys. So I have heavily relied on that. And we just use different companies, different people, and we just call them when we need them and they come on over. So it's been pretty easy. The worst part is still just the tenant management and dealing with the tenants. So I wish we could outsource that too. And we would if we wanted to go ahead and hire the property management company. But right now it's probably only taking 5 or 10 hours a week for us to manage.
Gotcha. Is there any tools or platform you guys have started using while you're out of state that has been helpful for you guys, or you haven't really found anything?
No, we're not using any type of software. We used to use Trello for organizational reasons. So we would have a different like board or card or whatever for each property. And that's where we would keep our tasks organized so that my husband and I were on the same page. And then I do all of the like bookkeeping on my own, just because I am a finance nerd, so I don't mind. So I use Excel and Google Sheets for that. Gotcha.
Makes sense. Do you have any recommendations for, I know you touched on it a little bit, but for people looking at, hiring somebody or a property manager in an area out of state that you think would be helpful that you haven't touched on yet, or you think you covered it all?
I mean, I would just go back to asking for recommendations. So go to the investor association in that city. If you have family and friends in that city, ask them. Or you can also look up a real estate, maybe like a lender in the city, and maybe they will know who the good property management companies are.
Yeah, I think it's super important. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I continue to network. We continue to network. It's anytime you look in a new area or you're looking to do something different, or just even looking to replace something you have that you're not quite happy with, we always go for referrals, and that's where we start. It's by far probably the most important way we get business. Trying to think of anything we have gotten that hasn't been a referral. I don't even know.
It's been a long time. I say it all the time, a successful real estate investor, finding good deals, all that stuff, but you need to have a contact. You got to have more contacts, right? The more people you know and the more people you can ask help for, the faster you can fix a problem, you'll be more successful. Like you said, there are so many communities out there and networks and real estate associations, whatever it may be, but by using those resources, don't feel embarrassed or shameful. It's like, oh shit, someone stole 20 grand. What am I going to do? I don't want to admit it. There's nothing wrong with that. Cause you define what I tell people all the time, go buy something, fuck it up, lose 50 grand. And you're going to learn more from that experience than if everything goes perfectly. But when you're in those networks, you say, okay, hey, what about that? Now you have a story, right? If anyone ever asked about those two individuals, you'd raise your hand and say, don't do it because here's why. And you would save someone the headache. And that's sort of what the real estate, that's really what the real estate community is about. It's who do you know? Where are they? I got to ask a question and you'll get down the right path. So I think you outlined that beautifully, just, using the resources that are available to fix problems and issues and help whether it's, technology or maintenance or whatever, but that's the name of the game. And I tell people all the time, don't be scared to tell your war stories, tell them, because you're going to save someone the headache. And then simultaneously, you're probably going to learn from the mistakes. So, everyone should make them. You try and make as little as you can, but when you do, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I think it's important to know too that, if you get into this, you're almost certainly going to have problems or have a war story. And it's just the ability to make it work, shift and change and get past it. The amount of people we talk to that hit a bump in the road and then quit is very low. Most people end up figuring out some sort of solution or a way to make it right. Or, there's times it's just that deal didn't work, but other deals have. So, I think sometimes people get that fear or something holding them back of, something's going to go wrong. Let me save you the time and the trouble. Something is going to go wrong. You just got to figure it out and get over it, because it happens to nearly everyone. I mean, it's happened to us countless times, and still somehow manages to happen. So,
oh yeah, I got hundreds of stories. So
yeah.
Hundreds of mistakes.
Yeah. So I do have another question that might be helpful to some people, probably not everyone, but a few people. If someone was thinking about writing a book, is there any tips, tricks, recommendations, hard-learned lessons, war stories that you would give people?
Yes, 100%. I'll first start with the best resource I think that is out there, which is the book You Must Write a Book by Honoré Corder. She is brilliant. She partnered with Hal Elrod to expand his Miracle Morning series. So she has a course, she has a bunch of stuff. I just learned everything that I did from her book. So I wasn't investing in all these other things. And I think that's where some people can go wrong with the book thing, because again, most self-published authors sell 250 to 300 copies, which maybe will end up being $900 or $1,000. So you have to start with your budget in mind, and your first goal should just be to break even. So with Money Honey, I was scared to invest a lot of money because it wasn't about me making money in the first place, and I had no idea if it was going to be successful. So I spent under $600 to launch Money Honey. I had a good editor. Now, the place I went wrong, and I wish I had spent more money, was on the cover design. So it's sitting behind me. It's not a good cover. You want to know why? Because I try to design it myself, and I'm not a graphic designer. So I tell people, don't skimp out here, sort of like the property management thing. This is not where you want to be cheap. You have to have a good cover design. Now, the good news for me is I'm launching the second edition of Money Honey in September, so in about a couple weeks, and I have a totally new cover that is revamped and much more professional. But that's a huge mistake to avoid. Another thing for people to watch out for when they're first starting out is that I never would have expected publishing a book to be such a vulnerable thing, right? So I had done other things. I'd put myself out there and I promoted myself before, but it is putting your work out there to the public for other people to read and judge is so scary. And that's part of the reason I quit. I was overcome with self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And the more that I've talked about this and talked with other authors, everyone goes through this. Every creative artist, every author, every person launching a product or service, everyone goes through this stage of having intense fear. So I think just expecting that to happen and knowing how to kind of fight through it with logic and reason rather than giving into your emotions, that is really key for your success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that last point, because I think it translates to the social media side of things. And even with our podcast, for me, it was always, I'm starting as early as 24 and now 28, even still today, I'm like, why are people going to listen to me? Why does anybody care? And the thing that I realized, and I'm sure you resonate with this too, is, I don't think I'm, the best person that everybody should go to. Like, I'm the number one person in this field that they should listen to. Like, I'm not, 100% out of 100, but even if I'm 5% out of 100, there's people that are at levels 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0 that I can at least help. So I may not be the right person or somebody that can listen to for everybody, but I know there's people that are, further in the beginning of the road and would like to do something similar or get there, that I can be helpful for. And I'm sure it was similar for you, where you talked about having those conversations with your family and friends, and you realize, like, hey, how come people don't understand this? And it was, you had done years of being a finance nerd, as you said, of understanding those things that other people didn't because they didn't enjoy it as much. And even if you weren't the finance expert of the entire world, there was still a ton of people you can help. Like you said, 15,000 people that's not an insignificant amount of people that you helped. And even if it's just one, that's kind of the mindset you have to have.
Yes, and I'm so glad you said that, Chris, because if I had been starting out writing my book and I had told myself, well, I'm not Dave Ramsey, I'm not Susie Orman, and then just not, so then I could have talked myself out of writing the book completely. And that's where a lot of people get it wrong. You don't have to be the number one expert in your field, but I truly believe that everyone has a unique voice and a unique gift they can share with the world. And mine happened to be writing about money in an entertaining way that really resonated with female millennials.
So I think you just nailed it at the end. Everybody has a unique thing. If you can, the way I look about real estate and the way I've always said this is that, the whole purpose of this was not, there's no monetary value that we get. It was, I wanted to create a country club for real estate investors where you didn't have to pay to get in, but it was a platform where if someone heard a guest and they really wanted to make that next, we'll make the introduction. It was a place where you can learn. And I shit on all three of us earlier by saying, don't take advice from someone that doesn't know what they're doing, whether they're 27 or 33. Take advice from people that have gone through this process before. And I said that, yeah, we're all younger. I'm 33, and you guys are sub 30. It has nothing to do with the age, right? If you can resonate with one 18-year-old or one 70-year-old man or woman that listens to your podcast or read your book, that's a win, right? Yes, you sell some copies of your book, and that's awesome that you make that money. But the intention behind the book, I think you said it earlier, was if I could help one person, and if you can help one person achieve something, that's more like substantial, and you feel better by someone hearing that story or reading that book and being successful than it would be if you made $100,000 a month on your book. That would be awesome, but that means there'd be so much success from people reading that book. It would correlate 100%. So yes, whether you're the best at what you do or the worst at what you do, that your story still should be told. And no one should be scared to tell their story, because listen, people are going to talk shit behind everybody's back. That's just the world that we live in. Who cares, right? Do what you do. And if you can help one person by knowing nothing or knowing everything, it doesn't matter, because in the end of the day, you got to wake up and look in the mirror yourself. It doesn't matter what people think. And I'm lucky enough that my personality, I don't care. It's hard for some people to realize that. You just got to put yourself out there, and whatever happens, good, bad, or indifferent. But no one should be scared about it. Everyone goes through it. But in the end of the day, it's irrelevant. As long as you can help someone out, that's the name of the game. So I think you illustrated that beautifully by explaining that point. And I think that everyone here has done it by putting themselves out there in various ways.
Yeah. It's funny too, because I think what's important is like the context in which you talk as well. None of us are sitting here and talking like we have every single answer. Like we're not talking about like, oh, here's what we should be doing in the COVID economy. None of us have any idea. I think it's the way in which you present yourself. And it was funny when you first just said, I don't care if you're the best or the worst. I said, well, I don't know if I want to hear from the worst, but then I actually thought about it and I said, I would actually love to hear from the worst real estate investor in the country that's continuing to do deals, because you would learn so much. And if they just, as long as they weren't trying to like put on airs, like it would actually be kind of cool to be like the worst real estate investor. Now that I think about it, it would be like a really cool branding marketing. Maybe that's the next goal. I can be the worst, but like, imagine how much you'd learn from that person.
Yes.
Like you could instantly flip that into a career of, you'd probably be a New York Times bestseller. I'm the worst real estate investor. You marketed yourself that way. So if anybody out there, you think you suck at real estate investing and stuff like that, maybe you're the next big marketing bookseller and you just don't know it yet. But yeah, I think it's all about how you present it.
So we're writing a book. I'm writing a book. I can barely put sentences
I'll be your
together.
first. If somebody's out there, you want to nominate yourself as the worst real estate investor, I will be first person to buy your book if I think you actually are.
And I'll be the second.
There you go. John,
I'll take the title. I don't mind it. I'll talk about all the shit that I've done wrong, right? It's easy. I can't write the book because I'm borderline illiterate. I mean, I really can't. I barely can put a sentence together. So it would be an interesting read.
It's all right. We'll get Rachel to write it for you.
There you go.
I'll just compile everyone's stories.
There you go. Perfect. I love it. I think that's an awesome place to wrap up. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, your experience, your insights. I think it was tremendous. I definitely learned a bunch. I think anybody listening would have as well. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, follow along, hear your story, check out your books or anything you're doing, where can they do all that great stuff?
Yeah, so both of my books, Money Honey and Passive Income Aggressive Retirement, are on Amazon, ebook, paperback, and audiobook. And I will give your listeners my passive income starter kit for free. So if anyone wants to download that, they can go to moneyhoneyrachel.com/bonus.
Awesome. Beautiful. Guys, definitely go check it out. Definitely pick up the copy of the book. I'm definitely going to be getting the passive aggressive one, retirement. I'm terrible at memorizing, but definitely go check it out. And guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you're not already subscribed, it would mean the world to John and I if you would do so. And if you are, please send it to a friend, family member, colleague, somebody random on the street that you think would get a ton of value out of it. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group. It's facebook.com/group/the REI experience. Trying to connect with all of you, hear from you, and just, not just be a sound on the end of the earbuds. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on. It was great to have you on. I definitely learned a ton. Can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much, Chris and John.